The iPad Pro 2018 will change everything. So I've actually done a video on this new iPad, on the 2018 iPad X, which is probably not going to be called the iPad X, but I don't know, iPad Pro 2018. But essentially this is going to be the biggest iPad redesign ever since the original iPad back in 2010. So since my last video on this thing, there have actually been some really big updates on the 2018 iPad Pro or iPad X, depending on how this thing is going to be called. So grab some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy. Okay, so this would be essentially my third video on this new 2018 iPad. So in the first one, I actually talked about all the 2018 iPad models. So all the major updates that we might see with the cheap 9.7 inches iPad, the iPad Pros, and the iPad mini as well. So definitely check out that video if you want to know more about all the other iPad models. And then in my second one, I only talked about this major change, the iPad X or the iPad Pro 2018. And essentially this is going to be finally the biggest iPad redesign yet. So if you take a look at the entire iPad lineup. So the original iPad, for example, that one came out in 2010, followed by a significantly thinner iPad 2 a year later in 2011, followed by a thicker but Retina iPad 3, and then followed by a faster iPad 4. Then we had the iPad Air 1, which had the first major redesign in an iPad with thinner bezels and also a redesigned aluminum back. And then the iPad Air 2 was even thinner than the Air 1 with the laminated display this time. And then instead of getting an iPad Air 3, Apple did something pretty interesting. So they introduced the 9.7 inches iPad Pro, which, was essentially the iPad Air 3, just with a higher price point. Essentially, that's honestly what the 9.7 inches iPad Pro was. And alongside this iPad Pro iteration, we've also seen a larger 12.9 inches iPad Pro as well as the iPad mini lineup. And then last year in 2017, Apple introduced an updated version of this new 9.7 inches iPad Pro, aka the iPad Air 3, and it was this new iPad, the iPad Pro 10.5 inches. So this was the first screen size increase ever on a regular iPad. So I actually got myself an iPad Pro 10.5 inches myself back in December, which I know was really, really late because at first I never wanted to get this thing because I didn't have a need for it, but I actually wanted to have something that was small and portable, essentially a really, really small and portable laptop for lightweight things such as emailing, scripting, and planning videos like this. I absolutely love this thing. So I also got the Apple Smart Keyboard, which is surprisingly thin, and you just unfold it whenever you want to type, and it works really, really well. I love this thing as well. It's not as good as a real keyboard since, this is fabric, not plastic, but it's definitely usable. And I also got an Apple Pencil for it, and the iPad Pro overall is surprisingly powerful. I mean, you can edit 4K 60 video on this thing thanks to the Apple A10X processor. And by the way, I've actually done most of my thumbnails since December on the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil as well. So this thing is actually a very, very powerful and a very useful device for me as well. So I never thought I would use it as much as I do, but I was thinking of trying it for a while and see how it goes and then returning it if I didn't like it. But here I am almost 2 months later. I'm loving this thing. So the 10.5 inches iPad is almost perfect because, it's incredibly powerful. It comes with an amazing display, 120 Hz refresh rate, the highest on any iOS device, along with an iPhone 7 camera, which is a complete overkill for an iPad, not even to mention laptop-grade speakers. Yes, you do get 4 speakers on this thing, so 2 on each side, and they actually sound incredible, even better than a lot of laptops out there. And again, the performance beats pretty much any other tablet out there and even a lot of laptops out there. And the battery lasts up to 10 hours, which is crazy considering everything that I've said before. So really, there's nothing bad that I can say about this iPad apart from maybe the design. So it's not a bad design, but it's not that amazing either. So the iPad Pro 10.5 inches actually comes with thinner bezels than the iPad Pro 9.7 inches. And now it kind of looks a lot more like a bigger iPad mini, which is good, but then when you compare it to something like an iPhone 10, well, it looks kind of quite outdated. And we've had a ton of rumors and reports that Apple is working on a major redesign in 2018 for the iPad Pro, basically for 2 reasons. The first one is, the one that the iPad hasn't been updated, hasn't been redesigned in ages, and people are kind of bored of how the iPad lineup looks like. And then the second reason is because Apple wants to integrate Face ID in basically every single device that they make. So we have it on the iPhone 10, and all 2018 iPhones are also set to get Face ID as well, including the cheap iPhone SE 2. In case you want to know more about that, I've actually done a separate video, a full leaks and rumors on the iPhone SE 2. And then of course that Apple would want to integrate Face ID into the Macs as well. But before having Face ID on all Macs, it needs to come to all iOS devices first. and that includes the iPads. So because of Face ID, Touch ID would be removed. Therefore, we would have no need for a home button, and because of that, the bezels would be made significantly thinner. And there are essentially two ways that Apple could redesign this new iPad, the iPad X or the iPad Pro 2018. So the first option would be having this iPhone X design style, which is definitely what I want to see. So essentially almost no bezels entirely, just that top notch, which would still be needed for the sensors. But unlike the iPhone X, where the notch is essentially blocking some icons on the top, this won't be a problem on the iPad since you still have a ton of space left on the top. And then option number two is to have a design with no notch at all, and just make the entire bezel essentially the height of the notch. So we would have a bezel in that case, definitely a bezel, but no notch. Let me know in the comments which option would you want to see. Would you prefer the first one, so the iPhone X design, or the second one in which we have a slight bezel, but we don't have a notch? So let me know in the comments which one would you prefer. Now, in case you're wondering, how would you actually hold this new iPad? Well, the iPad mini and also the iPad Pro 10.5 inches, they have some very, very thin side bezels, and those devices have the best palm and accidental touch rejection that I've seen on any device. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. You can literally use these devices with like holding from the actual display panel, and you won't have any issues. So I don't think this is going to be an issue with the brand new redesigned iPad Pro. Now, some of you might know that iOS 11.3 Beta 1 has just been released a few days ago actually, and developer Felipe Esposito has discovered a few strings in iOS 11.3 Beta 1 that actually refer to a modern iPad. It's called iPad Modern. And what's even more interesting, by the way, is the fact that the iPhone X was referred to iPhone Modern before it came out. So the word modern is probably referring to both a redesign and also the use of Face ID rather than Touch ID. And probably the big question for this iPad is it going to come with an OLED display, just like the iPhone X? Well, most reports are saying no, and this is what I personally believe as well, because Apple was struggling with the OLED display production for the iPhone X heavily. Keep in mind that Samsung is the one actually manufacturing these displays, and Samsung already makes a ton of displays for their own smartphones, so the Galaxy S lineup. So using an OLED display for the iPads would be quite impossible at this point. Keep in mind that iPads come with a significantly larger display than an iPhone, for example, an iPhone X. So an iPad display size would essentially use 6 or so iPhone X displays, or even more. Okay, so in the end, I'm actually looking forward to seeing this new iPad in person. I'm really curious to see which design is Apple going to go with. Is it going to be the notch design, so with a notch, or no notch but with a few bezels? So let me know in the comments which design style would you prefer. But in the end, is the iPad Pro 2018 or the iPad X worth it? Well, if you already have a 2017 10.5 inches iPad Pro, I would say no, just because the main feature that you would be getting with this new iPad is a more modern design, Face ID, and emojis, of course, and that's pretty much it. So the OLED iPad would be an even bigger change because of that display, but it's only coming in possibly 2019, if not even 2020. Probably 2019 though. Oh, and something that I should probably mention about this new iPad is that if you already have an iPhone X, you know how different the gestures are, the touch gestures. Well, those would be coming to the iPads as well. So swiping up would let you go home, and swiping up and holding would activate multitasking as well as the control centers. So I don't think they're gonna add the gesture in which you have to swipe down from the top right. No way for the control center. No way. And some of these gestures are already here on the iPad with iOS 11. So you can just swipe up, and then you can bring the control center up and the multitasking bar. So we already have some iPad X gestures on iPads with iOS 11, so to say. So yeah, let me know in the comments what do you guys think about all this, the iPad Pro 2018 or the iPad X. Do you think it's going to be a big change, or do you think that, since essentially the main thing that we're getting apart from Face ID is maybe some slightly bezels, some slightly thinner bezels, but apart from that, we're not getting anything. So let me know in the comments if you think it's worth it or not. And definitely subscribe if you want to see more Leaks and Rumors episodes like this one. And then also, don't forget to enable notifications by tapping on that bell icon so that you get notified as soon as a brand new video comes out. But yeah, this has been pretty much it. So thank you for watching. I'm Daniel. Feel free to like if you enjoyed it, let me know. I'm Daniel. See you guys in my next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.